welcome everybody as folks start to join. This is the Modern Learning Evolution, Developing a Connected Workforce with Matt Donovan. I'll be taking the next 45 minutes with you guys today. Well, while folks are kind of get in here and get settled in the session, and we'll start here in just a second as I know folks are starting to come into this. And we are recording this session and it'll be available after this. And we do have a copy of the slides, and I'll make sure that we have that with the final versions. I have a copy of this one, but I'll make sure that you guys get the most updated version so that we can follow up with that as well. All right, it is good to see everybody. So let's see here. All right, so this is me, Matt Donovan. You can see myself in the video here. Good to have you guys. I'm the Chief Learning and Innovation Officer for GP Strategies, Senior Vice President as well. For those of you that may not know me that well, I am a human-centric design enthusiast. I am a classically trained instructional designer who along the way have really become, I would say, excited at the concept of really driving into human-centric design features and elements, not just for the conveyance of instruction, but really around the overall learner experience through the learning journey. I often introduce myself as a recovering instructional designer. As I mentioned, I am classically trained, but what we're finding as we move into the future around the evolution of meeting the new learner needs, how we actually need to think differently and how we approach our design challenges. And I am a multidimensional thinking acrobat in the sense that we have so many things in this world that are changing. And I know many of you are very keenly aware of the rapid change in our learning ecosystem as well as our personal life as well. And that actually brings me to my quick note here. I just wanted to take a moment before we got started. I didn't want to share with you guys that more than 130,000 lives have been lost to COVID-19. And I just want to do this to kind of acknowledge the impact that's going on to everyone here. And that's a global number that we look at. But from our side, it's important to kind of give a recognition and acknowledgement to those that are on the front line that are supporting us, enabling us to continue our lives, those at those critical services, in the front lines, in the ERs, in the hospitals and all that. But obviously what we're all going through and the loss of personal loss, we've also gone through this as well. So much of what I'm talking about will be kind of cast in the light from which I, compared to when I originally submitted the proposal for this and how things, I may have changed over the next time. But I just want to take a moment and give some recognition out for those that are dealing with a lot. All of us are, but many of us are also out there supporting us on this front line. So within that, I wanted to take us to on point here. And I know many of you may or may not know, but this is Alvin Toffler, and is one of my favorite quotes. So if you've seen something before, you may have seen me use this one. But it first introduced it, came into it back in the day when I was in graduate school, really looking at how over time looking at what he was considered to be a future, how it's very relevant for what we have today. So, he talked about the illiterate not being those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And of course, to update it, I've adjusted it to include those who cannot connect, reconnect, or collaborate with others. And from a learning perspective, that is a critical component as we're going through this. So as we're going through and talking about this, I wanted to keep things active for you guys. This is going to be a conversation driven, so please use the Q&A instead of the chat window. We'll keep everything in the Q&A as we're going forward. So I do encourage questions and moments. I'll kind of slow down as we're going through that. I'll try and address questions that we have, and then we can come back and pick up any as we're moving forward on this as we're going through each of these topics. So we'll kind of keep that. I know I got a couple of folks out there moderating for us, so just feel free to ping us and keep me up to speed with what we need to answer as we're going through. So let's take a look at the next topic here. I've got, now many of you have probably been familiar with, the fourth industrial revolution. I'm sure you've seen this, and really for those you haven't seen this, this is a nice, I think, a recasting of what we've seen, the evolution of work over time. If you look at from the 1.0 over to the 3.0, this is kind of how work has changed and evolved over time as we've gone from like on the 2.0, the mass production, the assembly line, to what we're really kind of coming out of full force now is around the age of automation, computers and electronics, and now really moving into the 4.0, which is really looking at that cyber, the physical connected, the internet networked, and that's really what we're kind of coming into. And out of that 4.0 is giving rise to a couple of things. In the work side, you're seeing the rise of the digital consumer, the digital enterprise, and the digital operations. From the learning industry, it's what we're seeing is the increase of the digital learner, the digital learning enterprise, and the digital learning operations. And what we're saying is that we as a learning industry really need to begin to think about how we start to shift to evolve and adjust to the needs of the learners, wrap those systems around them to enable them at where they are at the point of performance, the point of learning, but also be able to make sure that we're capturing the right data and the information that feeds back into the system so that we can not only prove the interventions that we're putting in place, but we can also improve them as we're going through this as well. So let me say an example here. And so when I talk about that transformational shift, when we look at this, one of the examples that I've given from a business example is a financial one. So if you think of the banking industry and the 3.0 mindset, there were a lot of ways in which you as a bank consumer could actually connect with a bank. You could go into a branch, you could go to an ATM, you could start a mortgage application or a loan application online, and then you go into the actual branch to finish it off. So there were lots of ways from a customer service standpoint where you could actually connect with and meet, connect with the bank to get your whatever you want to do, your financial needs met. When you look at the 4.0, and I pulled this up because this is an example, and actually this is similar to a very personal example I've had recently, where I just basically refinanced my mortgage. And historically, I was under that old condition where I had a mortgage and had to kind of start the application online, went in to meet somebody. But most recently, as I did this, I was able to actually start, initiate, upload, be coached through an entire workflow, and actually complete and sign the entire mortgage online through my personal device. And this is the fundamental shift. When we talk about that evolution, is that instead of me having to leave my world to go into the banking environment to get great customer service, what they did is they wrapped it around me. So I was able actually to be between my home, my daughter's soccer practice. I was able to, in the parking lot while maybe waiting for the kids to come out from school, I was able to push this through, but I was able to do what I needed to do within my life, within my environment. And when we talk about the modern learning experience, it's really what we're trying to drive for the learners today, in the sense that they don't have to leave what they're doing, their work or their collaboration space, hopefully to be able to go out and get that. It's actually pulled into at the moment of work, the moment of performance, and we're trying to wrap those ecosystems around them to be able to meet them wherever they are, whatever they need to be doing. And I think it's a great aspirational goal from a design standpoint to be able to do that. And obviously with the impact of COVID-19 for many of us having to shelter in place and being able to have to work from home, this has become much more of even a critical journey of being able to access the information, the learning, the instruction that I need in order to be able to continue to make that shift and make that work still happen from home. So, one other thing I wanted to kind of call out here, which I thought was really interesting, is that throughout this experience, I had a role in an individual, his name was actually Chad, and he was what I called my mortgage coach. So instead of the old traditional relationship of the human being the person that kind of collects the documentation, puts it into all these places, and then, kind of pushes me through the process, they actually had a software program that actually pulled me through a workflow that kind of asked me for the documentation. We uploaded it with a progress chat, it had a dashboard on completion. It had automated reminders, encouragement. But what was really important is Chad was able to monitor that process and reach out to me as a human and be able to answer critical questions where I was in the process flow. So now what you've seen is that Chad had moved from that front line of really driving the process, collecting the documentation, pushing me through this transactional process, into actually having a workflow, me managing a workflow, and then him coming in and strategically enabling me and supporting me as I was going through it. There were a couple of times where I didn't know what I needed to do, or I needed some documentation. I needed to know if something additional would replace that, or I could substitute this for that. And he was right there available, able to kind of connect with me. When I was able to do it either during the early morning, late at night, he was available kind of on demand and being able to get back to me as quickly as possible. So he was very flexible, very accessible, kind of moving me through this process. So again, this is, I think, just a great example of, what can we start to look for, or where's the direction we can go when we think about the learning ecosystems that we want to put in place, that we wrap around our modern learners and how they start to engage and work through this. Now, I'll tell you one last thing that, though, me as somebody new in this, there was an element of change that I did embrace. So in order for me to be successful in this new 4.0 reality, I did have to think differently how I was going to interact. So for example, I had to learn how to basically connect with the workflow, connect with the system, get the information I need, being able to push through that, get the documents back. I had a little bit of technology I had to be more comfortable with. I had to be able to be a little more thoughtful in structuring some of my questions, or knowing that when I needed to, I could reach out to Chad and he'd be able to help me through the process. So there is, three things that come out of this. One is they created and moved the place where the humans were. I, as the consumer, had to think differently about how I engaged, how I connected with, and how I used the different people in the system. And then the addition of that human and that new part of the value chain to really help engage me. So those are some of the things we're going to continue to talk about here as we're moving forward. So the traditional paradigm has been disrupted, and now more than ever. And I think when you think about the work has historically been more structured, more defined, in many ways has been a lot more face-to-face. And what we're finding right now, and more sensitive than ever, is that the work itself is evolving. Not only is the outputs that we have, but the emphasis, the conditions surrounding them, what we're putting out, that context is changing. The worker themselves, with the assumption around how they're going to get what they need in order to perform the learning and the information. Traditionally, it's been that the organization provides everything they need. You knew what your job was going to be. I'm going to put you through the training, and then you are ready to go out and perform, and you're able to really knock it out. Well, we're really looking at this, that they actually have to take ownership for the learning journey and be able to identify what they may need to build the systems, the support networks. The organization still has a very critical role in building out an ecosystem, making resources available for them. But what's happening now is, instead of that passive, I'm going to receive this, is getting much more connected with the actual workers taking, or the ownership for their learning journey. What do they need to know? When do they need to know it, et cetera. So the next one really is the last one around the workplace, where we're talking about it was historically a much more simplified connection for the learners to the peers to be able to do things. I have a picture of the model where we were all getting together, and what we're finding is far more complex, multidimensional paths to peers and learning, and with a rapid shift towards much more virtual than we are seeing it face-to-face. Now it'll go back to some degree, but I think that basically out of COVID-19, we're definitely pushing into a much more virtual, much more complex system throughout. So I just wanted to make sure and pause and see if there are any questions here with anybody that's up to this point, real quick. All right, I'll continue on. All right, so here's some new mindsets and skills for the new workforce. And these are things that, as we're looking at this, some key core mindsets are really, these are things that are what I consider the fundamental building blocks. These are things that that feed into the knowledge base below for the individual contributor or the manager and leader skills. And so depending on who you subscribe to, these are future work skills that are actually becoming less future and more today. The numbers 1 through 8 down here at the bottom may change in name, or a few more will be added, and maybe a few more will come off. But this is what we're seeing are some of the core new skill sets that we're seeing. But the fundamental thing is around some core mindsets, really looking at the learning agility and ownership, the adaptability and resilience, empathy, growth, innovation, and inclusion. These are all mindsets that we need to be able to pull in for those folks. Yes, and so talked a little bit about some performance support software. I'd be glad I saw that question. and I will follow up with that. So Bobby will show you a couple of components with that, and we'll get to that to the tech ecosystem as well. Here. Thank you for being the first person. You actually, what a place, I don't know what it is, but thank you for actually being the first one out there with a question. Appreciate making it a little more interactive, so thank you. I also want to talk about some new roles that we have for the Connected Learning Organization. And so what I do is I often anchor over here, and there's some moments of learning need, and many of you familiar with Mosher and Gottfried's 5 moments of learning need. I love it. It's brilliant. It makes a lot of sense. It's very learner-centric because it starts off and identifies what are key moments when somebody's going to need to be able to learn something. Now you'll see that I've added 2 more here at the bottom in the sense that what I'm saying is that we're seeing in our conversations that a couple of 2 different ways in which people are asking questions that are there. So the first 5 are still here: learning for the first time, when I need to learn more, when I need to apply or refine, when I need to adjust to change or react to failure. Those are all elements that definitely drive towards meeting a need that they have. So it's very learner-centric. I love that. But we're also seeing that some emerging needs is that beyond when adjusting to, so that reactionary response to a change or failure, but if you need to proactively innovate and forwardly think about before something has gone wrong or before something is externally changed, how do you actually go about and innovate? That's a new need of how you start to wrap some learning components around that, and then grow for your next role, which is moving into a future position. So these are things that we're seeing that all predicate different locations, different types of needs, different types of information coming in when they need to wrap that. So what you learn for the first time will be different than when you need to be able to react to failure, adjust to change, because those are much more performance support oriented, quicker, et cetera, that are coming in. Now I did see another one here. Some of this requires investment. How do you get leads to invest in a digital ecosystem when they are very cash sensitive instead of investing in training and furloughing training teams to save cash? Yeah, that's a really good question, Jim. And I think that is a long answer in how you'd be able to use some of that. But I think it gets into looking in the future. And right now, what's one of the most important conversations is about survive and moving into thrive. And so just to pause, we're having 2 types of conversations. And I think one thing is in the learning ecosystems, how we can just make things accessible. Today, we're looking at converting things more into VILT, from an ILT or face-to-face to a VILT. Those are about quick conversion. But beyond that, we're also looking at being able to move things quickly into that thrive status, which enables the organization to grow and evolve over time, to be able to rapidly move into what I would say where you can grow on the fly no matter the change of the environment. Sorry about that. But it's a good question. And I think long-term that investment will pay off because what it does is enables the organization to be much more agile over time, enables them to adjust because this change that we're experiencing right now won't be the last. I anticipate more in a growing number of ways in which there will be more disruptions, more adjustments, more change that the organization has to be able to respond to. So I think the critical is about a strategic direction for the organization to be able to take its human talent and enable them to be able to make that adjustment and ultimately perform and execute on the mission. It's a great question, and there's no simple answer to it, but I think it's about being able to enable the organization strategically. Let me continue on here with a couple of expanded learner roles. Real quick, when we think about traditionally it's consumer, it's like we talked about the learner just kind of consuming what's put out there by the organization, but there are new roles which learners are becoming much more as they start to own that journey, being moderators of conversations, curators and sharing with their peers, being a contributor to learning experiences from user-generated content to participating with others, being a creator of their own mini learning lessons that they could share with other folks, for example, and a collaborator at the point of work, for example. And those are new roles that in an organization you need to be able to enable, support, and grow to be able to even take part of that ecology or that ecosystem. These are new functions in which they're going to participate in this, and it's much more, engaging and allows them to actually connect with others and create that relevance that we talk about. The next one was connected organization learning roles, and I've added this in here. And this is some great work that Rob Cross has done out there, work on collaboration, collaborative overload, basically social analysis in an organization. And really, when we look at this, he's talked about 4 critical roles in an organization. And what we're saying is that for this from a social learning standpoint, and so he talks about central connectors, boundary spanners, what he calls is peripheral specialists, and then information brokers. And these are all parts of a critical organization that sits in the fabric of that network underneath of it. So if you think of a work performance network there underneath that, I've modified a couple of these to think about these are things that we need to cultivate in our organization. These are new roles from an organizational standpoint. While we have the expanded learner roles becoming much more active in the organization, we need to think about people that are going to be centralized learning connectors within a business unit. These are the people that can say, hey, I need to learn about this, or I want to go down this pathway. What's the human connector? You know, like Chad was my mortgage coach, how will you have somebody in the organization be that centralized learning connector for them? How will you have somebody that goes outside the boundaries of an internal unit or function or group and connect with others, or externally to bring out external industry resources, other organizations with what they're looking at? So which people in the organization naturally are going across these to bring in a variety of perspectives and dimensions into solving the solutions. And then when you think about, I have a very specific performance improvement need, or I need to come in for some innovation or thoughts like that, really bringing in those and identifying those folks for coaching and mentoring relationships that can be spun up or spun down based on a need amongst the population. So who is that kind of that fabric or that connection of folks that we turn to when I want to get better at something, or I need to get some quick coaching or some support on that. So these are parts of the network that often in organizations we don't think about it, because we often think about the organizational structure very laid out top to bottom, like we often think of it in an org chart. So these are some new key roles. This is some new information. I do want to give full props and recognition out there to Rob Cross and his work. He has several HBR articles. There's a whole body of work around this. I encourage you to learn more about it if you haven't been exposed to Rob. So he's a fantastic guy. And so, as I mentioned before, I'll make sure that we get a copy of the slides. I'll PDF them up and make sure you guys get a copy of those after this session. We'll make sure we get those out there for you guys. All right, so I want to continue on. You know, one of the other dimensions I talked about is I mentioned relevance a couple times. And I think one of the elements we have to be is this shared value amongst learners and organizations and designers and creators is around an adherence or discipline to ruthless relevance. And the idea is that we've had a long-standing history of being able to push tons of content out there, but it's not really relevant. And I love this in the sense that if we thought of content were water in many organizations, we have tons of content, but yet our learners are still saying it's not relevant for me. And I think it's important to understand that we can't always design for relevance, but we can create the conditions for relevance to be there. This is where the learners have to step in and take accountability to kind of take it the next step through. But they do have a fundamental role in nourishing themselves, but we have to create the conditions that enable them to get to what they need. I talk about 3 layers of relevance, and this is a new component that I've brought in. And what I talk about, so if you think about the concept of business acumen, and many organizations have a business acumen course, and we know that a fundamental of that is like being able to read a financial statement. So the first layer of relevance is often where we get wrapped around. We put most historical energy and content creation is that off the shelf or that easy. What does an income statement look like? What can an income statement tell you? But what we're finding is that to get to that value for our learners, we need to go beyond that and into what does our organizational income statement look like? What does our income statement tell you when you look at it? For those of you that have a little bit of a business background, you know that a generic income statement versus our works can be very different in what it tells you. And the ability to do the analysis and the insights can be significant. But we don't want to stop there. And then we want to wrap in the third layer of relevance, which is really how can I use our income statement to inform my business decisions or make business decisions that will predictably affect where the income statement will ultimately end up or change. And so the idea here is that from our design standpoint, we want to be able to put in or create the space for these 3 layers of relevance. And this is really a robust argument in the world of curation, because a lot of folks go out there and they will curate for the first layer of relevance. There are tons of great assets already out there on what income statements look like. But as you can imagine, there are probably far fewer resources of how do you read our organization's income statement, and even fewer that may be off the shelf available that would tell you how our company actually uses them to drive business decisions. So when we go in from a design standpoint, you want to be able to not only, bring or borrow or bend new ones around that first layer of aggregation, but you want to start to really craft and layer in the second and the third layers of relevance for our learners. And so this allows them to not only consume the first time, but if you think about how you invite them in, maybe we put into a learning journey where we give a couple of examples of some key decisions that were made, but we open it up for others to be able to start to donate from their practical experience to learners as they're applying, or folks that are near graduates in the application space being able to do it, or experienced professionals. They're starting to contribute back into the ecosystem, smaller piece of these assets, which show the case examples of how you're applying this. So now instead of the organization having to provide everything, you can actually start to involve everybody into your ecosystem so they can start building and adding to it. Now, when I talk about blended learning, it is important to think about when I get into this, where you really want to think about the old style of blended learning. When we talked about this, it's often a lot more like a tossed salad. If you look here, you've got the tomato, the lettuce, and the cheese and all that. So if you think about the old traditional blended learning, and maybe I do an ILT with some instructor-led or face-to-face with some WBT, maybe I put some SharePoint job aids out there and available. But each of those pieces typically is standalone, and I could take them out and they have their own value. What we're saying in the future state is really around a digital blended solution or digital blended journey. It looks a lot more like a smoothie, where all the pieces and the parts are actually combined in a way that it creates more than just the sum of the individual parts itself. So it almost becomes something new. And that's really where we want to think about from the entire experience and the entire journey as we go through this, how we're able to actually push folks through that experience. So in a much more on the right side, where it's a continuous connected part of the experience versus those discrete like blended used to be. So I know we've talked a little bit about the ecosystem. So some of the things that you have to kind of blend across. Now, this ecosystem layout is one that I've kind of done, which looks at a much more user-oriented from a functional standpoint for the organization. So I tend to break down the tech ecosystem a little different than maybe some other folks have. But I start off with thinking about the layers and how we kind of use technology from an organizational intent standpoint. So the first one is around the point of access, the battleground for, as a learner, where do I go when I want to start my learning experience or my learning journey? Where do I go to look at something? That starting point? And that big battleground is often either in the LMS. We're seeing a lot more with the curation platform doing that, or some organizations have really gone much larger in enterprise with a dynamic HTML5 portal that overlays a couple of different systems. But the idea is you're trying to get to as close to a single point with whatever your needs are. Can I bring you into a single point and then take you out from there? So the next layer is really looking at the ways in which the learners and performers kind of connect with the ecosystem. So you can think about mobile devices, either bring your own, your personal device, or one that's provided by the company, a laptop, a desktop, or wearable technology. Could be a heads-up display, could be a watch, could be a variety of pieces of wearable technology. Now, learners may actually contain all of these. So you're not just wanting to build or connect with them across one, but you want it to be able to be a seamless experience across. As I take my learning from my personal phone to my work phone back to maybe a piece of wearable device, for example, I may want to have that continuity in the overall experience. The measurement and analytics layer, which is really a fundamental component of being able to not only measure, are they enjoying or seemingly getting value out of the experience, can they actually pass and think through mastery of content? How do we actually measure whether or not they're transferring into the workplace, getting into behavior change, or are we actually seeing business results? And then we're also seeing new layers around a variety of flavors of data around experience, engagement, and connectivity and sharing, all that kind of rolling into that experience engagement. I put adaptive platforms in here because it's actually a way in which we start to think about how we evolve and grow and shift. And then the analytics kind of brings all of that data together in a way in which an organization can start to draw insights and gather more deeper relevant information around what they're seeing. So this is a critical layer that not a lot of organizations focus on, but this is by one, I'd say, the fundamental core set is knowing how you're going to measure and pull data from across a range of platforms is critical, because no single platform has all the data that you're going to need. An experience platform, this is growing here. I've got a couple new ones I've added into this one, but you think of the learning path like a curated platform, a MOOC like an Intrepid definitely comes into that, where it's cohort driven, spaced over time, micro, social, all those components. Learning bots, a range of these bots that are specialized to come in, that are able to do performance support, behavior reinforcement, event-based bots, or event-based applications that wrap around a specific point in time, virtually or a mixed experience. Campaign-based adaptive learning. After my launch, how do I actually reduce the forgetting curve, the impact from that by repeating and sustaining feedback. Work-enabled reinforcement, where I'm getting actually into the point of work performance and I'm serving up reminders and reinforcement and remediation based on an actual application cycle. AR, VR, MR for mixed reality, throwing that in here. And then the last one is social. So this layer is really growing and changing. There's tons of platforms in there that are driving that. Then on the back end for how the organization actually organizes itself, how does it develop, author, publish? How does it share through a broadcast? How does it manage those assets? How do you manage documents that are shared between work and learning? And then curation. So this is at the layer, how you really manage your content for reuse, sharing as you're going through. And then the last one is really looking at the learning assets. These are kind of the building blocks as you're going through. These are videos, micro WBTs, IPDFs, all kinds of, these are the building blocks that are shareable across this experience, either on demand or for the first moment of learning need. Now, all this is good, and this is the point of the learning side of the equation. Then we get into the right-hand side, which is really the point of work. Thinking about collaborative workspaces like Slack or MS Teams are definitely coming out where people are collaborating and doing work. Wrapping around work platforms. If you think of like sales enablement platforms where I'm going out and doing pre-call, during or post-call planning, my talent suite, like, you know, Workday or Successful, these are human capital management, for example. External sites of information that people often pull in outside your own internal ecosystem. And the last one are work-specific knowledge management sites. Think of things like, you know, SharePoint or AWS. I threw a couple of names in here. Don't take it that those are the only ones there, but I'm trying to iconically, you know, show you what's in that box. But the key point here is that, you know, and I've added 3. So if you've seen this before, what's new? I've highlighted the ones in stars that I've worked in here. These are some new features that are definitely coming out for that. So I want to make sure that we actually have that, you know, in this, because this is what you're kind of building that experience across the table. So let me kind of push into and show you an example. So I wanted to show you an example of an emotional intelligence learning journey. So this is an example. I've got Sarah here on the left, and we've got a learner persona for her. She is definitely somebody who's working. She's looking at trying to move into being prepared for the work of the future that she wants to be able to do. We picked a topic around here around emotional intelligence. And what we've kind of got is these are the kind of things that are on the palette that we've pulled around. It's not everything, but we've pulled some examples out of the ecosystem that we've wrapped her around here with her. Everything from, we've got some testimonial videos or podcasts from influencers, people and peers that have applied emotional intelligence, or folks that are giving me something new to think about, but it's kind of feeding into an experience, a virtual community to support and build, you know, emotional intelligence champions, a leader and manager's toolkit that can wrap around Sarah with her manager. She can use it with them. They can use it with her to help bring it into her personal development plan or her work action plans. Interactive quizzes and scenarios throughout, so she can test her knowledge to see if she's grasping the ideas or get feedback on that system. Communications, where she's at, to help her keep informed with new offerings that are coming out for the reinforcement. Going around the clock here, practical tools and tips for employees and leaders that are kind of going out and pulsing out over time. A cohort-driven, spaced experience where she could go in and with a group of folks and set aside some time to explore the concept of emotional intelligence and kind of take a deeper dive in that with some others and kind of share and reflect still wrapping around, action and work planning over time, but it's with a dedicated set of folks that she can have robust, ongoing conversations, dialogue, coaching, etc. And the last one is like an emotional intelligence chatbot, which could run around the experience that kind of reinforces and extends it. So what does this journey kind of look like over time? And we kind of look at this, and so this, for example, is kind of building here, as you can kind of see the components filling out. This could be a range of the ways in which she might, for example, so she's in a workspace, she might come across the first piece of communication, stress out, improve your emotional intelligence using an AR app on her personal phone. She begins to start the journey. She watches some animations or some videos that are popping up that she can take a look at. She takes an EI self-assessment. She opts into the emotional intelligence chatbot, which will kind of pulse out some things for her to think about over time. Maybe as part of the experience, she opens up, the 30 days of a calendar and sets up an Outlook task bar or task activity to look at it each day. This has been something that's been really interesting. She could set up 30 days of micro activities that she could integrate into an Outlook, or if we wanted to, we could actually integrate it into a functional chat bot, like a wellness to reminder and refresher. She got micro commitments she'll be doing, and then she can check off how she's progressing. She'll join, collaborate in a community space on the topic, and she can contribute to others, learn from others. She has some articles, and they're kind of being refreshed and updated, so she's getting new thoughts, new things kind of coming into the ecosystem. And then that, in the group that there's more content is coming, there's going to be a launch for the cohort if you want to come in and join a deeper dive into the topic of emotional intelligence. You'll be able to kind of come in and join into that. So this is an example of how we kind of look at bringing to life, again, that journey over time and how Sarah is evolving, taking more ownership and determining where she needs to go, how she wants to do this. We're blending things that are supportive, but also it's a connected way that meets her as she evolves over time and allows a very rich fabric and a variety of ways to actually access her. Now, you don't have to start out with all of the things. We put everything in here, and if you don't have it all to start off with, that's perfectly fine. I think part of the journey here is to know that you can expand and add to it over time, and I think that's really critical to keep in mind that you don't have to have all of this built at the first start, but we do need to think about growth and what the potential can be so you can build in the space for that to take place. So I know there's a couple of questions, and it kind of brings me to my time with you guys. I do have one quick closing thought, and then we'll go straight into the questions. But I think for the evolution of the learners and ourselves as designers, I love the Deming's quote. It's not necessary to change through Bible. It's not mandatory. But I know through the resilience of our design community and our folks, we will find a way to get there for folks. So I want to kind of turn it over to a little more Q&A. Take a couple of minutes here as we're heading in. I do see a couple of comments in here, questions. So Stephen, I saw your comment around relevance is critical and key. I love your comment here that, the content can't be targeted report into a more relevant form. The biggest question we're talking about, that relevance, ruthless relevance, is like, if it's not need to know now or need to know in the near future, I can't anticipate it, why would I waste my time providing it? One of the biggest activities we've been working with our partners is to go through a rationalization of content. And we often talk about our new design, how we're sourcing content. We go through a first phase is what we call burn, and then we have a borrow, bend, build, buy strategy to kind of pull and piece together these learning journeys. But that first one about burn is just important to say, if it's not relevant and not valuable, pull it away. You want to be able to create space for the learners, the performers, and those on the journey to be able to contribute to the value of the ecosystem to help each other through that model. But Stephen, I really appreciate that, great comment. So what are some of the learning operations changes to consider in the short, immediate, and long-term to the changes I'm discussing? I think the first thing is to start off with a change management mindset. I know that kind of pivots a little bit from this, but I think one of the things that organizations are struggling most with is to take into consideration that this is not just a change for the organization in the way in which they want to enable the learners, the way in which they push and support, but it is a change for the learners as well. Like I mentioned through my mortgage application, I had to shift the way in which I had done this from times before. I had to become more comfortable. That is a change exercise. And in your organization, planning to get to take on that accountability. Because the first rule in a modern learning experience is that the learners must take accountability. If they don't, this model is unsustainable. And the fact of the matter is that it is becoming too complex, too ambiguous, too volatile, too fast for organizations to plot along, figure out what the change is going to be, roll it downstream, get everybody bought into it, because by that time, the jobs, the roles, the outputs will have changed. You need a system that is going to be more flexible, more responsive, more adaptable, and there's an underpinning of that change management practice within it. In terms of the technology and those kind of things, I would definitely start to look into ways in which I would put an innovation space in place where you have the opportunity outside the point of execution to explore how these platforms, tools, and technologies will productively and through evidence-based really actually make your ecosystem better. Because, you know, we want to avoid the shiny object syndrome, but the best situation is to be able to put some things and test them before you actually need them. And I'm sure many of you have had that experience of like a mission critical initiative. Worked with a couple of organizations who were going out to change their performance development cycle. Instead of one big where they did salary actions, the performance feedback window, they've gone to multiple conversations and kind of decoupled the salary. That's a big organizational change. But they were at the same time going, we want to make this shift, and because there's a lot of visibility, we think we can bring in some, you know, shiny new technology that'll maybe help us. You know, we got the funding, we got the interest, maybe we can do that and get something done. I'm going to tell you that is probably one of the worst times to try new technology or untested. If you go into and create an innovation space where you actually have this, the idea is that before that moment of that critical initiative, now you can actually start to pull things in as you need them and say, for this initiative, it'll be really good because we know that we've gotten some great success with some performance reinforcement chatbots. We know that we've got a great cohort-based approach that really works with a platform. We can ramp up at each of the 4 cycles, but now you know it's going to work before you actually try and do it. So I would say if you can, as soon as possible, get involved with that, or work with partners who can help you get those set up, relatively speaking. I know my organization is something we do for our partners to kind of help invite them into seeing what our partners, our vendor partners can bring to the table with, you know, really good platforms to try them out, see what they're like. So let's see, recommendations you have for orgs that have limited to build this out, what might you prioritize? Again, I would start with, you know, looking at where, you know, you can build out the big strategy for you want to go into, but start with some easy, low-hanging fruit. I would start around some mission-critical initiatives or high-impact programs to kind of wrap some of this around, get some early wins, some visible wins, places where you can actually measure success and impact with them. So, you know, there are several of these things. One of the ones we've seen is organizations really driving towards data analytics and data-based decision making. So say, for example, that was something that was emerging for organizations. Be a great place to start to work with some of these approaches to get that involved and pulled forward in that space. So, but again, start, you know, have a bigger plan, start small and prototype and get it. You don't have to go out there with a big bang and expect to be perfect. Matter of fact, it won't be perfect. You will learn a lot of things along the journey. So collecting feedback, so that you have insights into what really is working and what is really being successful, that's fundamentally critical. So making sure that you got a feedback mechanism, a measurement strategy, that's going to be critical and be in place. So I think those are the key things that I would focus in on that. Got a minute or two if there's a couple other questions that might be out there. Let's see. Just looking through, make sure. I think we've got a lot of these, but I think it kind of comes back to, you know, in summary, well, if anybody had any final questions to share out for this, you know, don't hesitate to reach out to partners. I'm going to tell you that anybody who tells you that they've been doing curation for 10 years and they know everything about it, unless they've worked for the Smithsonian or for some of the very large digital, you know, rights management groups, I would say that curation, for example, and a lot of these new technologies are very new. We're still, you know, growing as a consumer base in how we use them and how we implement them in organizations. So get out there, ask a lot of questions, bring folks for the experience with that. So Diane, it looks like you've raised your hand. I don't know if there's a question tied to that or. Looking for that out there. So. All right. So Diane, I was looking for a comment for anything if you had a question wise. So. All right. All right. Well, I'm going to give it a minute or two. I know we're right at the top of the hour. That's my time. I'd love to continue the conversation with you guys. I appreciate the time and energy you guys have. I'm passionate about this stuff. I know that there's lots of conversations. Feel free to reach out with me. I'll be in the booth. You have the information in the app. You can reach out to me through chats or questions. I'd be glad to chat with you guys. I love talking about this. I'm passionate about it. So want to just kind of, keep you guys up to speed with it. So reach out, connect with me. Thanks again for your time. And most importantly, be safe, take care of yourselves. We'll get through this, we're all in this together, but look forward to seeing you out there in the bold new learning adventures we're about to face together. Thank you.